Hello, everyone, and welcome to the course of U.S. History. I am your host, as always, Mr. Samuelson. Last time we were together, we looked at Native American culture groups within the modern United States and Canada. It was a whirlwind tour, and we looked at a lot at that lesson. But today, we are going to be focusing ourselves a little bit more on three empires of the American South. We'll be looking at two empires in Mexico and Central America and another down in South America. So let's get to it. Let's begin our discussion today with Mexico. Mexico and northern Central America provide a great climate for early civilization. It's warm, winters aren't too harsh, food is plentiful, and early civilizations thrive in these environments. Now, the two of the three most advanced Native American civilizations arise in this area. We're going to see the Aztec, mostly in central Mexico, and we're going to see the Maya crossing from Central America into southern Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula. So we're going to spend the first half of our lesson, 2/3 of our lesson, focusing on these two cultures. Let's start with the Maya. The Maya is a culture with some skilled farmers. And they first clear the forests of Central America 3,000 years ago. These were actually ancestors of the Maya, but they've been lumped together into one cultural group, which we will simply refer to as the Maya. Now, by 250 CE, they had created over 200 cities in southern Mexico and north central America. So it's a very advanced, very large population. 200 cities is quite significant, and nothing in North America could compare to where the Maya were. The way they did this is that they had to drain marshes and they had to terrace hillsides because they live in a mountainous jungle. And mountainous jungles don't produce a lot of food to feed cities. So they had to create farmland where there was none. And you can see here these terraced hillsides where water wouldn't run down the mountain and carry your topsoil and crops away. Instead, it stayed flat and you could grow enough food to feed your people. Now, they're going to grow so much food that they can actually trade this food to their neighbors. So they're going to grow wealthy off of this system that they've put in place. By creating so much farmland, they were able to gain other goods that they might also want. One other item that the Maya grew were cocoa beans. Now, cocoa beans are going to be incredibly valuable because we get chocolate from cocoa beans. Cocoa beans are very valuable because people like chocolate. And they're also durable. They're not going to break. You're not going to destroy them. If they are dried, they last for a long time. So they actually make a very good currency, and they're sometimes used as money. People can carry around bags of cocoa beans and trade that for other goods. And it's a very useful thing for the Maya to have. Now, Mayan cities. Let's first begin by saying they had 200 cities. That's great, and that's a lot of people living in cities. But any culture at this time, anywhere in the world, most people don't live in cities. Most people live in near the land that they farm. And this was true for the Maya as well. So most Maya were living in simple houses where they farmed. But the Maya did have some very impressive cities. And most of them would have a pyramid. This is a rather impressive Mayan pyramid. And most cities' pyramids would not be this large. But most cities did have some sort of pyramid for their priests and rulers. And the region, even today, is dotted with a lot of these pyramids, some of which have been restored, and others which are still buried in the jungles. Now, most of the larger cities also had a stadium where people could go to watch athletic competitions. This is one excavated stadium of the Maya, and in this stadium they would play a complicated and dangerous ball game. In this ball game, they would try to take a rubber ball, and this is a solid rubber ball, so it's not going to be an inflatable light thing. It's going to have some weight to it. And what they need to do is they need to knock that ball through this hoop. Just kind of think of a combination of soccer and basketball. They can't use their hands. They have to use their feet and their hips and their elbows and their heads, I suppose. But you want to get the ball through that hoop. You also don't want to lose this game, because for certain games on certain occasions, the losing team is sacrificed to the gods. So this is a high stakes sport. It is literally a life and death sport among the Mayans. So, be careful if you're into athletics in Mayan society. Now, the Mayans had a number of really amazing achievements for the time. Math and science were very important to them, and it was very important to them because they needed math and science in order to practice some of their religious beliefs. The priests would use their math and science to watch the sky and really understand what's happening with the stars and the sun and the moon, and they figured out how to calculate a solar year, a 365-day calendar. This is a picture of the Mayan calendar. Don't ask me to explain it because I can't do it. But that is a Mayan calendar, and it represents a 365-day calendar, or a solar calendar. This is an advancement over most societies of the time that operated on a lunar calendar, which changes every solar year. So the months, you might have one month that's in the summer one year, and then a couple generations later, that month is in the winter. It moves. So you've got to always account for that. They also had the number 0. Now, it might not seem like having the number 0 is this big accomplishment, but it is. Many societies did not have the number 0 or the concept of the number 0, and therefore could not do a lot of complex math. The Mayans had it. They needed it for their religion. They needed it to calculate everything that they were doing with astronomy, staring at the stars. They had to have this 0, and they created it. They also had a complex hieroglyphic writing system. Hieroglyphics is using pictures to represent words, but their pictures were a little bit more complex than the Egyptians in some important ways. These different symbols would represent sounds, and you could combine these symbols to create larger ones that represented words. It just looks like a picture, but this is a combination of symbols that actually makes words. And then through these, they could create all this architecture that included all of these stories and their history. Now, we have not completely deciphered the Mayan language, but this is something that's being worked on, and there have been some pretty significant breakthroughs in decoding the Mayan language recently. So check that out, because it's pretty cool. Now, the Mayan are going to go into decline. And they went into a steep, fairly sudden decline around 900 CE, and their civilization kind of collapses. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, because they had done a lot of great things. Now, by 1500 CE, or when the Europeans are showing up, little remains of the Mayan cities. They're ruins in the jungles by then. But the Maya people still existed, and they still live in the region today. You go into southern Mexico, northern Central America today, and you will see Mayan culture existing there. Now, there are a lot of theories on why the Maya went into decline, and I've looked at a number of them. And the ones that seem to make the most sense to me is a combination of climate change and soil depletion. The idea that they had been in this region for so long, farming that land for so long, trying to support a large population, that the soil simply lost its value, and crops were no longer able to sustain a growing population. And then you have a climate change, and even a subtle climate change, and it can change what sorts of crops thrive in the region. And it can lead to a collapse of agriculture, and without farms producing food, you can't have cities, and therefore your civilization collapses. So that's all for the Maya. Let's look at the Aztec. The Aztec civilization arose in central Mexico around 1300 CE. They're going to rule Mexico and spread into parts of Central America, and they're going to rule until 1520. We have an exact date on when they disappear, because the Spanish are going to be there and be a pretty significant part of it. Now, the Aztec are going to borrow heavily from Mayan culture. And there's a lot about the Aztecs that reflects the Maya. The number 0, the pyramids being built, their calendar looks like the Mayan calendar, but they're going to be different in some important ways as well. Now, the story of the Aztec begin with the city of Tenochtitlan. See, before they had this city, the Aztecs were hunter-gatherers, but their gods had urged them to settle. And a number of Aztec priests spread out looking for signs of where the gods might want them to settle. And on an island, one of these priests came upon an eagle standing on a cactus eating a serpent. And this followed a number of religious signs and indications that this would be a favorable place. And indeed, once the Aztecs settled there, they thrive. Their city, Tenochtitlan, grows to hold over 100,000 people. Now, in 1500, 100,000 people is huge. There are only a couple of cities in Europe that are 100,000 or more people. There are no cities in Spain that come anywhere close to 100,000 people in 1500. So when the Spanish arrive and see this, they're going to be blown away. And it's not just the population. The city is packed with pyramids, temples, schools, parks. It has a zoo. Tenochtitlan is this advanced city. There's no way around that. It is simply one of the premier cities in the world at the time. Now, of course, it is ruled by this Aztec Empire and these Aztec people. And they're not the nicest. The Aztecs are warriors. It's who they are. It's what they do. So they come pouring out of the city of Tenochtitlan and they start attacking their neighbors. And after defeating their neighbors in battle, they make their neighbors pay for peace. We'll stop attacking you, but you got to give us a lot of stuff. Send your good stuff our way. And included with your good stuff, we also want a lot of your people. We need slaves because, we're Aztecs. We're warriors. We're not farmers. We need others to work our fields. We need others to do our work for us. These temples, it takes a lot to build these temples. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. And so they enslave their neighbors. Now, a lot of this wealth that they're getting from the neighbors is being reserved for the priests. And it's being used to pay for the temples, and the slave labor is being used to build these temples. It is a big focus of their life. Religion is very important to the Aztec people. In particular, their god of the sun and war. Their god of the sun and war is their main god. And he is a greedy god. And every day he demands human sacrifice. This is where your slaves come in as well. They have to feed their god on a daily basis. And so there were daily ritual human sacrifices on the Aztec main temple for the god of the sun and war. So if you were enslaved by the Aztec, it's not going to go well for you. Now, these popular and wonderfully happy Aztec people are ruled in their final days by Montezuma II. He is the 10th and final Aztec emperor. He's not liked, and neither are the Aztec. Their neighbors fear them, but they don't like them and they don't love them. So when the Spanish show up and they want to attack and capture the Aztec Empire, a lot of these neighbors are going to join in. If you take a look at this map for a moment, we have the Aztec core states in orange, right around Tenochtitlan. But this tan color here, these are your tributary states. These are the people who have to pay the tribute. These are the people sending slaves to the Aztec. And they do this because it's either we send slaves or we all die. Well, when the Spanish show up, they think they might have another option. They might have a chance to overthrow the Aztec. And so they throw in their lots with the Spanish and they attack. This man right here, the Spanish leader of this expedition, Hernan Cortez, is going to lead the attacks that destroy the Aztec Empire in 1520. We're going to go into that in much greater detail in a later lesson, but now let's take a look at the Inca. The Inca are the third empire I want to talk about today, and they're the largest of the American empires in 1500 CE. They rule most of the western half of South America. When we talk about East and West South America, we use the Andes Mountains as a divider. So western half of South America is the Andes and west of the Andes Mountains. The Brazilian territory over here, the Amazon River Basin, is very thick rainforest. No civilizations on the scale of the Aztec or Inca arise in this area. Now, the Inca are going to be powerful for a different reason than the Aztec. The Aztec threatened and attacked their neighbors. The Inca, sure, they did this sometimes, but mostly their neighbors wanted to join and wanted to be a part of the Inca Empire because certain benefits came with it. If you joined the Inca Empire, if you were deemed worthy to join them, the Inca would come in and they'd build roads and they'd terrace your hillsides and they'd do all of this work to make the land more productive. Sure, you had to pay taxes and they were sent directly to the Inca rulers in Cusco, their capital city, but you had an overall more productive society. So if you triple your wealth and you have to give a portion of that in taxes to the Inca, well, you're still in better shape. And this is why most people wanted to join the Inca. They're going to rule from their capital in Cusco. I don't have a picture of Cusco, but this is a picture of Machu Picchu. This is a resort city on the top of the Andes Mountains, reflecting one of the nicer places you could have lived in the Inca Empire. This picture down here just kind of shows the scale of the rocks used to create a number of these places. And keep in mind, they're building these walls without any modern machinery. They're hauling all of these rocks by ropes. So it's pretty impressive what they're able to do. Now, the Inca Empire, it is going to fall. It's going to fall because of three disasters that strike the Inca pretty much all at once, or at least within a quick succession of each other. The first is smallpox. Smallpox is a European disease which Native Americans had no resistance to. And it reached the Inca because it had passed from the Aztec through the Maya, through Central America, and down into South America. Smallpox hits them before the Europeans ever see them. And this disease kills 50% of the people. Now imagine what that would do to a society. Think about America today, and if half the people in this country died in just a couple of years. That's what happens. Really shakes up your empire. Especially when one of those people who dies is your king, is your ruler. The king dies. And this triggers a civil war because his two sons have a conflict. One son has been promised the empire. He's the heir. He's the guy who's going to take charge. And everybody knows this, except that his other son is with the king when he dies. And he claims that the king told him on his deathbed that he should rule instead of his brother. And all the main army is with him at the time, and all the other leaders are with him at the time, and he manages to get the control of a lot of those people. And they wind up going to war with each other, and ultimately Atahualpa wins. This is Atahualpa right here, and he becomes the next Incan ruler. But right after that civil war ends, before he even goes back to his capital city, he hears about this white Spaniard, Francisco Pizarro, who's poking around in his empire. And he's like, go check him out. Go see what this is about. And he meets with Pizarro, and Pizarro ambushes and captures Atahualpa. And we'll get into the longer story here, but at another time. But basically, Atahualpa is held as a hostage. Once a demand is paid, a whole bunch of gold is paid in order to set him free, but instead of setting him free, they kill him. And now the Inca Empire has suffered smallpox, a civil war, the death of another king, and they've got the Spanish in their territory, and they are leaderless. And this is not good for the Inca. We'll look at that more at a later time. But next time, I'd like us to take a look at what's going on in Europe, because there are some important changes going on in Europe that's going to actually lead to these Spaniards showing up in the Americas. So we've got to walk backwards in our storyline. We've got to look at Europe for a little while, and through that, explain the story of European exploration and eventually settlement in the New World. So that's coming up next time. Thank you for joining me for today's lesson in the course of U.S. history. Farewell.